Imagine for a moment that everything that has happened in your life, the good and the bad, has a special meaning. It sounds difficult to believe, right? Well, hold on tight, because what you're about to hear today could change the way you see things forever. Have you ever wondered why certain things happen to you? Why sometimes it seems like everything is going wrong? Maybe right now you're going through a tough time and can't find any meaning in it. But what if I told you that none of it happens by chance? Today, God has a very important message for you. Nothing is an accident. Everything happens for a reason. Everything has a divine purpose. Yes, you read that right. Everything you experience, every problem you face, every door that closes is part of a greater plan. Sometimes we feel lost, as if life were a big, meaningless mess. But what if you could see your life the way God sees it? Imagine being able to understand that what hurts you now is actually preparing you for something incredible. Are you ready to see God's master plan for your life? To understand that nothing you are experiencing is a mistake? Get ready, because what you're about to learn will not only give you hope, but will fill you with a peace that cannot be explained with words. Before we continue, I want you to do something important. Write in the comments, "God, in you I trust." By doing so, you're saying that you trust in God's plan for you, even when you don't understand it. Dear listener, I invite you to stay with us until the end of this video. And if you haven't already, subscribe and activate notifications so YouTube can alert you when we upload a new video. Point 1, Proverbs 19 verse 21. Many are the plans in a person's heart, but it is the Lord's purpose that prevails. Sometimes we get so caught up in our own plans, our own dreams, that we forget there's something bigger at play. Proverbs 19 verse 21 reminds us of exactly that. Many are the plans in a person's heart, but it is the Lord's purpose that prevails. We all have plans. We want to achieve things, chart our paths, and make life go in the direction we desire. Maybe you have a list of goals for the year or are dreaming of a bright future, and that's okay. It's natural. But what we sometimes forget is that though we make many plans, only God's purpose prevails. It's easy to fall into the illusion that we control everything, that with enough effort and planning, we can shape our lives perfectly. But the truth is, no matter how good our intentions are, our plans are limited. We only see a small part of the picture. While we're focused on the here and now, God has a much broader perspective. He sees a complete panorama, the past, present, and future, and how everything intertwines into a greater purpose that we can't even begin to comprehend. Have you ever made plans that seemed solid, only for them to suddenly fall apart? Perhaps you thought you knew exactly where you were headed, but life took an unexpected turn. This happens to all of us. The reality is, our plans aren't always infallible. Sometimes we fail. Sometimes the paths we choose aren't the right ones, and other times we simply encounter obstacles we never saw coming. In those moments, it can be frustrating. It may feel like all our effort was for nothing. But what if those failures, those unexpected detours, are actually signs that God is redirecting your path towards something better? This is where trusting in divine purpose becomes crucial. When our plans don't work out as we hoped, it's easy to lose hope. But let me tell you something. God's purpose is always better than anything we could imagine. Even when we don't understand it, even when it hurts, or when it seems like everything is in chaos, God is working for our good. If we trust His guidance, we'll find that, although we may not be on the road we planned, we are on the road we're meant to travel. I know letting go of control isn't easy. We all want a sense of security, to feel like we're in charge of our lives. But the truth is, true freedom comes when we surrender to God's purpose, when we stop trying to do things our way and allow God to guide every step. That doesn't mean we can't dream or make plans, but it means we must be willing to lay those plans at God's feet and say, "Lord, your will be done." One of the most important lessons we can learn is humility. Sometimes our plans are more driven by ego than by a genuine desire to follow God's will. That's where we need to pause and ask ourselves, am I chasing my dreams, or am I chasing the dreams God has for me? It's a delicate balance. But when we're willing to submit our desires to God's will, we find that His ways are always better than ours. God's purpose is unchanging. It doesn't shift with circumstances or our failures. God knows the beginning and the end of our story, and every detail, every unexpected twist, is carefully woven together for our good. It's a purpose that doesn't waver, even when our plans do. And that constancy is what can give us peace in times of uncertainty. So, when your plans don't work out as you expected, don't despair. God is in control. His purpose prevails. And though you may not see it now, you can trust that God is working in every detail, guiding you toward a better future than you could have planned for yourself. Point 2, Isaiah 46, verse 10. I declare the end from the beginning, from ancient times, what is still come. I say, my purpose will stand, and I will do all that I please. Let me ask you something. Have you ever felt overwhelmed because you can't see what's coming in your life? That feeling of uncertainty that we've all experienced at some point, when you have no idea how things will resolve or where you're headed. But here's something I want you to remember. God doesn't just know the future, He declares it. In Isaiah 46, verse 10, God says, I declare the end and beginning, from ancient times, what is still to come. Think about that for a second. God already knows the end before anything happens. He has already seen it. That completely changes our perspective. While we only see fragments of the present and often worry about what's coming, God sees the entire story in one glance, from the beginning to the end. He has already seen it all. There are no surprises for God, no unforeseen events. Every event in your life, every unexpected turn, is under His perfect knowledge. To you, it may seem like things are out of control, but to God, everything is as clear as water. And here's where something even more incredible comes in. God not only knows the future, but He also controls it. His sovereignty is absolute. Nothing happens in the universe that is outside of His plan. Sometimes, when things don't go as we expect, we might think something went wrong, that somehow God lost control of the situation. But that's not true. God has total control over every detail, every circumstance, and His purpose will be fulfilled regardless of the circumstances. There is no force that can frustrate His plan, and that is one of the greatest sources of peace we can have. God's plan does not change. He established it from the beginning, and nothing that happens in this world can alter it. That means no matter what you face, God's purpose will be fulfilled. You may not always understand it. Things may not make sense at the moment, but God's will is irresistible. It cannot be frustrated. What He has decided to do, He will do. And when you cling to that truth, there's a deep rest you can experience, even in the midst of uncertainty. I know there are moments when everything seems confusing, moments when you wonder if things will turn out okay or if you're on the right path. But here's the thing, God is not confused. What may seem uncertain or out of control to you is clear and perfectly established for God. His vision is not limited by time or circumstances. He sees it all, and if we trust in His perfect knowledge, we can rest in the assurance that no matter what comes, God is in control. This leads us to something beautiful. Security. You can trust that God's purpose for your life will be fulfilled. Nothing can stop it. The difficulties, the obstacles, the doubts, none of these things can prevent God from carrying out His plan. And that plan is good, even if it doesn't always seem so. Even when the road is difficult, God has a perfect purpose for you. And when you hold on to that truth, you can face anything, knowing that in the end His will shall prevail. That's why there is hope in God's plan. He already knows your future. He planned it and declared it from the beginning. And even if you don't see how things will work out right now, you can be sure that God is working. His promises will be fulfilled, no matter what you face in the present. And that is the hope that keeps us steadfast, no matter how uncertain your present may be. The future is secure in the hands of sovereign God, who sees the end from the beginning. Point 3, Jeremiah 29, verse 11. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Plans to give you hope in the future. Let me ask you something. Have you ever wondered if your life has a purpose? Of course you have. If the difficult circumstances you're going through have any meaning, or if it's all just chaos and chance. Well, there's a promise in Jeremiah 29, verse 11, that reminds us of something crucial. God has a plan for you. It's not just any plan. It's not an empty promise. It's a plan full of well-being, specifically designed to give you a hopeful future. And that is a truth that changes everything. The first thing we need to remember is that God is in total control. He's not improvising with our lives. Every situation, no matter how complicated it may seem, is under His direction. There are no accidents or coincidences in what happens to you. God knows exactly what He's doing, even when we can't see the full picture, and His plan is always oriented toward good, even if we can't understand it at the moment. Now, consider the context of this verse. When God spoke these words, He was addressing the people of Israel, who were exiled in Babylon. Imagine what that meant for them. They were far from home, in the midst of a foreign nation, feeling like everything they knew had disappeared. Yet, in the midst of that darkness, God reminded them that He had not forgotten them. He promised them a future full of hope, even when their circumstances said otherwise. And you know what? That same message applies to you today. In your moments of greatest despair, when it feels like everything is falling apart, God still has a plan. He hasn't forgotten you. And maybe you're wondering, how does this apply to my life today? Well, look around you. We all face difficulties, trials that seem to make no sense. But let me assure you, God is working on something greater. The answers you seek may not come immediately, but that doesn't mean God isn't moving in your life. Sometimes the greatest blessings come in the most unexpected packages. God is preparing something incredible, and although you may not see it now, it will come. When the Bible speaks of well-being, it's not just referring to having a comfortable or trouble-free life. The well-being in the biblical context goes far beyond the material. It's about a life full of purpose, inner peace, and spiritual growth. It refers to a state of fullness that can only be found when we are aligned with God's will. The trials we face are not meaningless obstacles. They are tools that God uses to prepare us for what's to come. The difficulties you face today may seem insurmountable, but they have a purpose. Every trial has a potential to develop your character, teach you valuable lessons, and prepare you for future blessings. Nothing is wasted in God's plan. Every tear, every challenge is building something greater in you. God sees beyond what, at this moment. You may not fully understand why you're going through certain things, but you can trust that it's all part of a greater divine plan. What God promises in this verse is not empty hope. It's a sure reality. His faithfulness is unshakable, and the future He promises you doesn't depend on your achievements or failures. It depends solely on His love and His promise. The future awaiting you is full of peace, fulfillment, and most importantly, the presence of God, because at the end of the day, what matters most is that God is with us, walking beside us every step of the way. So, in the midst of uncertainty, when you don't know what tomorrow holds, remember this: God is in control. He knows every detail of your life. Don't despair if things don't go as planned. Your story isn't over yet. And the best part? The author of your story is the same God who promised to give you a future full of hope. Don't give up. Don't lose faith. God is still working. Point 4, Romans 8, verse 28. And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love Him, who have been called according to His purpose. Let me tell you something you probably heard before, but that perhaps hasn't fully reached your heart yet. God has a purpose in everything that happens to you. I know, sometimes it's hard to accept, especially when life seems more like chaos and order, more pain than joy. But in Romans 8, verse 28, God gives us an incredible promise. In all things, God works for the good of those who love Him. And when He says all, He means literally everything. That includes the darkest moments, the ones we don't understand, the ones that make us ask, why me? Think about it for a second. The difficulties you face, the challenges that seem to shake your life, they aren't accidental. God doesn't leave anything to chance. You may not see the purpose right now. It may feel like everything is falling apart, but God is weaving something beautiful behind the scenes. There's a perfect plan in motion, one that we can't fully see from our limited perspective. It's like looking at just one piece of the canvas, while God has already painted the entire picture. This leads us to one of the hardest truths to accept. For God's plan to unfold in our lives, we must completely surrender ourselves to Him. Yes, that requires total trust, a trust that goes beyond what we can understand. It's easy to trust God when things are going well, but what about when nothing makes sense? That's where true faith comes into play. Loving God means being willing to follow his purpose, even when we don't understand the path, because who better than him knows what we truly need. Sometimes we feel like God is silent during our trials, but let me tell you something. Just because you don't hear him doesn't mean he isn't working. God never abandons his children, even when it feels like everything is falling apart. He is there, molding you, preparing you for something much greater. You may not see it now, but every step, every tear, every unanswered prayer is shaping something powerful within you. Trials, though difficult, are tools God uses to draw you closer to him, to teach you to depend entirely on his strength. Here's something key that we sometimes misinterpret. When God says he works for our good, he's not talking about material well-being or worldly success. God's definition of good runs much deeper. His plan has to do with our spiritual growth, with conforming us to the image of Christ. Have you ever stopped to think that those challenges, those disappointments, even the losses, are designed to make you more like Jesus? It's hard to accept, I know, but every blow of life is sculpting your character, bringing you closer to the spiritual maturity God desires for you. Now, don't think this is some generic promise. Each of us has a unique calling, a specific purpose designed by God. You are no exception. The ultimate well-being God promises you is directly tied to this divine purpose. And though we won't always understand the path we're on, we must trust that he is guiding us toward that destination. Holding on to faith in the midst of uncertainty is difficult, but it's in that place where our relationship with God grows stronger. Finally, I want to talk to you about something we all need: patience. You won't always see immediate results. Sometimes it will feel like God is taking too long. But I assure you, he is working on every detail of your life. The key is not to lose faith. Keep moving forward because God is building something beautiful out of the difficulties you're facing today. He doesn't make mistakes, and though the process may be long, his work in your life will be perfect. So, the next time you face a trial, remember this: God is with you every step of the way. He never leaves anything to chance, and your life is filled with purpose, even in the hardest moments. Point 5, Psalm 103, verse 19. The Lord has established his throne in heaven, and his kingdom rules over all. Let me remind you of something we sometimes need to hear, especially when things feel out of control. God is on his throne, and his kingdom reigns over everything. This isn't just a nice statement. It's a profound truth found in Psalm 103, verse 19. The Lord has established his throne in heaven, and his kingdom rules over all. Think about it for a moment. God, the creator of the universe, is seated on his heavenly throne, and nothing escapes his control. Not a single thing in this world happens outside of his sovereignty. It's easy to forget this when we look around and see chaos, uncertainty, or even injustice. But even when things here on earth seem out of place, God is still reigning. He is not like earthly kings whose decisions can be questioned or whose reigns are temporary. God's reign is absolute. He is in control of everything, from the grandest matters, like the destinies of nations, to the smallest details, like the most intimate concerns of your life. Nothing escapes him. And this brings us to a truth that is even deeper. His kingdom is eternal and unchanging, while human kingdoms rise and fall. Governments change and earthly power is temporary, but God's kingdom never changes. His throne cannot be challenged, and no force can compete with his authority. Sometimes it seems like evil is winning or that injustice prevails, but what we don't see is that God's kingdom remains steadfast, and his justice will always prevail, though sometimes not in the timing or manner we expect. When everything seems out of control, there is comfort in knowing that God has not lost control. He is not surprised by what happens in the world or in your life. God sees everything, every situation, every detail is under his supervision, and nothing happens without his permission. This doesn't mean we won't face difficulties, but it does mean we can rest in his unquestionable authority. No matter how big our problems are, God remains on the throne. It's easy to lose sight of this when we focus only on what we see here on earth. We see powers, governments, systems, and sometimes it feels like they have the final say. But the truth is, God has the ultimate control. No matter who holds power on earth, the true authority resides on the heavenly throne. God's kingdom doesn't change with political decisions or historical events. And though we may not always see how God is working behind the scenes, moving the pieces to fulfill his perfect will, we can hold on to this with hope. God's justice is perfect. While we live in a world where we often witness injustices, God is a righteous judge. We may not always see justice at the moment we desire, but we can trust that God's justice will prevail. There is no action, no situation that God doesn't see or judge with perfection. For those of us who are part of his kingdom, this is a source of great hope. We don't have to fear what the future holds because we know that God sees everything and acts with absolute justice. For those who are citizens of the heavenly kingdom, this sovereignty is our greatest security, knowing that our King is sovereign, that he cares for us, and that his plan is perfect gives us unshakable confidence. Our destiny is in the hands of a loving and powerful God. This means that no matter what happens in our lives, we can rest assured, knowing that God is in charge, that he is tending to every detail, and that his throne will never be moved. So, if today you feel overwhelmed by what's happening in your life or in the world, I want you to remember this. God is still on the throne. His kingdom reigns over all, and as part of his kingdom, you can rest in his perfect control. Point 6, Psalm 37, verse 5. Commit your way to the Lord. Trust in him, and he will act. Let me ask you something. Have you ever felt overwhelmed by the weight of making important decisions? You know, those moments when it feels like everything depends on you. And if you don't choose the right path, everything will fall apart? Well, in Psalm 37, verse 5, we find a promise that can change the way we face those moments. Commit your way to the Lord, trust in him, and he will act. This isn't just advice. It's an invitation to stop carrying the weight of the world on our shoulders and allow God to take control. Committing our way to God goes much deeper than simply saying a quick prayer. The word commit has a profound meaning. It's not just asking God to bless our plans. It's delegating, fully handing over our worries, aspirations, and desires into his hands. It's recognizing that even though we may have good plans, we need his divine direction. And sometimes that means accepting that we can't do it all on our own, that our understanding is limited, but his wisdom is infinite. Now, committing is only the first step. Then comes the act of trusting. And this is where many of us face the real challenge, because trusting God doesn't always mean seeing immediate results or understanding everything that's happening. It's much more than that. It's having the certainty that God is at work, even when we can't see it. When everything seems silent, or even when things don't go as we imagined, that's when it becomes hardest to trust. Not when things don't go according to our plans. But God still asks us to keep trusting him because his ways are perfect. The promise of this verse is clear. He will act. But here's something important to understand. God doesn't always act in the way we expect. His actions are aligned with his will, which is good, pleasing, and perfect, even if it doesn't always match our desires. We may pray for God to resolve a situation in our way, but his response is always better. We may not see it in the moment, but every action of God brings results that fill us with peace, bring us closer to his purpose, and allow us to grow spiritually. What God does is much deeper than simply solving an immediate problem. He works within us, in our character, in our faith. And this is where patience comes in. Waiting on God's timing is one of the greatest challenges for our faith. We want quick answers, immediate solutions, but God calls us to wait, not passively, but actively trusting that his timing is perfect. And while we wait, God teaches us to trust, not just in the outcome, but in the process. He molds us, prepares us, and when the right moment comes, his intervention not only resolves what concerns us, but also brings us closer to his purpose. This is an ongoing act of faith. Committing our way to God isn't something we do once and forget. It's a daily decision. Every day we face new situations, new decisions, and each day we have the opportunity to hand over those worries to God. And when we do, we experience something incredible. The peace of God, that peace that frees us from stress, that lifts the weight of having control of everything, and allows us to rest knowing that God is in charge of our lives. In our daily lives, this translates into relief. You no longer have to carry the weight of those difficult decisions alone. God is there guiding you, opening doors you never imagined, solving problems you didn't even know existed, and bringing peace in the midst of the storm. Can you imagine what it would be like to live each day with that certainty? God will act, and when he does, it's always for your good, even if it's not in the way you expected. So today, if you feel overwhelmed, if you don't know what decision to make, or if you're worried about what's coming, I invite you to do something. Commit your way to God and trust Him. Because I promise you, even if you can't see the path clearly right now, God is already at work. Point 7. Proverbs 3 verse 5-6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to Him, and He will make your paths straight. Notice that we all go through moments when we feel like we need control everything, right? It's as if we loosen our grip even a little, everything will fall apart. But Proverbs 3 verse 5 gives us a completely different instruction. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge Him, and He will make your paths straight. And there's the challenge. Trusting completely in God, not just in the easy moments or when things seem to be in place, but with all your heart and without hesitation. Now, that sounds easy in theory, but letting go of that desire for control, releasing the anxieties we carry, isn't so simple, is it? It's like we're constantly fighting against the urge to resolve things our way. But here's the key. Trusting in God means truly letting go of our worries, letting go of that impulse to have everything under control. Because let's be honest, how many times have we realized that despite our efforts, we simply cannot control everything? God calls us to complete trust, to unconditional faith. And when we fully surrender our hearts to Him, we stop carrying a weight we were never meant to bear. You see, human wisdom has its limits, though sometimes we don't want to admit it. We like to think we know it all, that our experience and knowledge are enough. But this is where humility is needed. Human wisdom is finite. We only see a fragment of reality, while God sees the entire picture. Sometimes we trust more in our own understanding than in divine wisdom, and that's when we start to stumble. God is infinite in wisdom. He knows the past, present, and future, while we only have a small part of the story. Why not trust a God who knows everything and stop leaning on our limited understanding? What this verse is telling us is that God wants to be part of every aspect of our lives, not just when we're in crisis or when things are going wrong, but in every decision, every step. Acknowledging God in all our ways means including Him in our daily decisions, big and small. It's giving Him the central place in our lives, not just when we need Him, but at all times. When we do this, when we recognize Him and depend on Him in everything, God promises to make our paths straight. Now, this promise that God will straighten our paths doesn't mean we won't face challenges or that life will be perfect. What it means is that even in the midst of difficulties, God will guide us, give us clarity, and sometimes even correct our course. It's a process of trusting that God knows what He's doing, even when we can't see it clearly. There are times when God will remove obstacles from our path. Other times He'll give us the wisdom to face them. And in some cases, He'll change our direction entirely to a better path than the one we had planned. When we truly trust in God, a great weight is lifted from our shoulders. That pressure of having to solve everything on our own disappears. We know that God is in control, and there's no greater peace than that. When we acknowledge God in our decisions, we align ourselves with His plan, and that brings a security the world cannot offer. So, practically speaking, trusting in God means that in moments of uncertainty, instead of clinging to our own solutions, we seek His guidance. It's a shift in how we make decisions. It's recognizing God in every area of our life, from the smallest things to the biggest. And when we do that, when we trust in His wisdom and direction, we begin to see how He straightens our paths, how He guides us on the right road. In the end, it all comes down to this truth. Divine wisdom is always superior to human prudence. Not because our prudence isn't useful, but because God sees far beyond what we can see. His perspective is infinite. And when we align ourselves with His wisdom, we can trust that our path will be the best possible one. Because ultimately, acknowledging God in all our ways doesn't just transform our decisions, it transforms our entire life. Point 8, Ephesians 1 verse 11. In Him we were also chosen, having been predestined according to the plan of Him who works out everything in conformity with the purpose of His will. When we think about the fact that we were chosen by God, it's overwhelming to realize that it wasn't a random act. God chose us as an act of love, a deep and personal love. It's amazing to know that his choice wasn't arbitrary, but is part of a carefully designed plan. Each of us has a specific purpose within that divine plan. This fact gives us an identity and a sense of value that goes far beyond anything the world can offer. This concept of predestination often leaves us with many questions. What does it really mean to be predestined? Predestination is nothing other than the sovereignty of God in action. In his infinite wisdom, he has a sovereign plan for our lives, and each of us is aligned within that plan. But at the same time, God gives us free will. This is where the balance comes in. God has a perfect plan, but he doesn't force us to follow it. Instead, he invites us to walk alongside him, to collaborate with his will, our growth, our mission in life. Everything is connected to that divine calling. And you know what? It's a great comfort to think that God is in control of everything. Nothing happens outside of his plan. Every event in the universe, every circumstance in our lives, God is orchestrating it all. Even in the hardest moments, when we feel like everything is out of control, God remains sovereign. That certainly should fill our hearts with peace, because no matter how chaotic our situation may seem, God has already written the story. Every detail of our lives has a purpose. There are no wasted moments or meaningless situations. God has a plan for every experience we go through. Sometimes it's hard to see in the moment, but when we look back, we realize that everything fits into a greater story. We are part of the divine narrative, and that transforms how we view even the most ordinary experiences. We're no longer living by chance. We're walking in God's perfect plan. And you know, the will of God is something precious. Romans 12 verse 2 tells us that God's will is good, pleasing, and perfect. But sometimes the difficult part is trusting it when we don't fully understand it. However, that trust in God's will gives us security, knowing that he makes no mistakes. His will is the best for us, even if we can't see it right away. Our identity in Christ is defined by knowing that we have been chosen by God. We are not just anyone. We are sons and daughters of the King, predestined to be part of his plan. And that changes everything. Living with the knowledge that God has chosen us with a purpose gives us a sense of direction, of mission. We're not here just to pass time. We have a divine purpose to fulfill, and that gives our lives eternal weight. When we understand this, anxiety fades because we no longer feel the need to control everything or solve it all on our own. We know that God is in control and his plan is perfect. We are freed from excessive worry and the stress that comes with trying to manage everything by ourselves. We can rest in God's sovereignty, knowing that even though we don't have all the answers, he does. Our salvation is also woven into this plan. God predestined us to be saved, to be transformed into the image of Christ. His plan includes not only our salvation, but also our spiritual growth and maturity. God is working in us, guiding us toward eternity, and that gives us incredible assurance. Our salvation is secure in God's eternal plan, and nothing can snatch us out of his hands. So, how do we live in light of these truths? We live with the awareness that we are chosen by God. This means we seek his purpose in every decision, every day. We know we are not alone in our struggles, and that God is working everything for his glory. And when doubts come, when hard times arrive, we can find comfort in the fact that God is in control. He has a plan, and we are part of that beautiful, eternal design. Point 9, Job 23, verse 10. But he knows the way that I take. When he has tested me, I will come forth as gold. Imagine for a moment that you're going through a tough trial, one of those that seems endless, and you ask yourself, why me? Why now? We've all been there, in those moments. It's easy to feel like we're alone, that maybe God isn't as close as we'd like him to be. But Job 23 verse 10 gives us a completely different picture. He knows the way that I take. When he has tested me, I will come forth as gold. Pay close attention to those words. God knows the way. It's not a random test, not something that escaped his control. God knows exactly what you're going through. And not only does he know, he is present in every stage. Trials are not coincidences. They have a divine purpose. They are often compared to the refining of gold. When a goldsmith puts gold in the fire, he doesn't do it to destroy it. He does it to purify it, to remove all impurities so it shines brighter. The same happens with us. The difficulties we face are not meant to make us fall, but to refine us, to make us stronger, purer. Everything you're going through is designed to strengthen your character, deepen your faith, and bring you closer to God. Sometimes what's hardest for us to understand is that these trials are part of the process of transformation. It's not just about enduring until it's over. Trials change us, mold us. Every challenge we face, if seen from the right perspective, is preparing us for something greater. You may not see it now, but in the end, you'll be stronger and more capable of facing whatever comes your way. God is transforming you. And although the process may be painful, the result is invaluable. That result is like purified gold. Just as gold becomes more valuable when refined, you also emerge from trials with much greater spiritual worth. You reflect God's glory more clearly. Think about it. Every time you go through a difficulty and overcome it, you become more like what God has designed you to be. You become a stronger, purer, more focused version of yourself, centered on what truly matters. I know it's hard sometimes to be patient. We want the trials to end quickly, for the storm to pass immediately. But trials can last longer than we expect. And that's where we need to remember that God won't leave us in the fire a moment longer than necessary. He is like an experienced goldsmith who knows exactly how much heat to apply and for how long. God won't leave you alone any longer than is needed to complete his work in you. If you're going through a long period of testing, trust that God knows what he's doing. The process is part of your preparation. It's easy to think that when we're going through difficulties, God has abandoned us. But nothing could be further from the truth. God is aware of everything that happens to us. Not a single detail of your life escapes his gaze. Trials are not a sign of abandonment, but rather an opportunity for God to prepare you for something greater. And if you trust him, you will see that in the end, everything has a purpose. The analogy of the goldsmith is one of the most powerful. God is like a goldsmith who carefully applies heat to remove what doesn't serve us. He knows exactly how much we can endure, and he is with us throughout the entire process. He doesn't leave us alone in the midst of trials. Like the goldsmith, God is present, watching, caring, and ensuring that the final result is perfect. So, if you feel overwhelmed by suffering, I want you to know something. You are not alone. God is with you, guiding every step, even when you don't see him. You are not adrift. You are not out of his sight. Everything you are going through has a divine purpose. In the end, you'll come forth as pure gold, stronger, more valuable, reflecting more of God's glory. And that is the hope in the midst of trials. God is doing a work in you that you may not fully see right now. But when it is complete, you will emerge as a new creation, stronger and brighter than ever before. Point 10. Ecclesiastes 3 verse 1. To everything there is a season, and a time to every purpose under heaven. Notice this. All of us at some point have felt the anxiety of wanting things to happen quickly. We want our dreams to be fulfilled immediately, prayers answered instantly, difficulties that end right away. And when that doesn't happen, we get frustrated. We wonder if something is wrong. But Ecclesiastes 3 verse 1 offers us a truth that can transform the way we view life. To everything there's a season and a time to every purpose under heaven. This verse reminds us that no matter how desperate we are to rush the process, God has a perfect plan. And within that plan, everything has its appropriate time. Life is like a cycle. It has its seasons. Just as we cannot hasten the arrival of summer or stop winter, there are moments in life we simply must accept and live through. Every event we face, every situation we go through, has a purpose and happens in its perfect time. However, many times we struggle against these rhythms. We don't want to wait. We try to control everything, rush ahead, or avoid what makes us uncomfortable. But in that struggle lies a conflict. It's not that things are going wrong. It's that we're trying to force the timing instead of trusting God's timing. Waiting is not easy. Sometimes it feels like everything is on pause, as if God has forgotten our prayers. But waiting on God's timing is not passivity. On the contrary, it is an act of faith. Every season has its reason for being, and sometimes the most powerful act is to wait patiently. There are seasons of planting and seasons of harvest. There are times when we move quickly, and other times when we simply need to stay still. What happens is that God has absolute control over these times, and though we may not always understand it, His timing is perfect. Everything has its specific hour, and that hour does not come before or after. It arrives exactly when it should. There is infinite wisdom in God's timing. He knows the best moment for each thing to happen in your life. Have you noticed how many problems we avoid when we stop rushing things? When we try to force situations or jump ahead, that's when we make mistakes. On the other hand, when we trust in God's timing, He provides exactly what we need at the exact moment we need it. Not before, not after, but always on time. It's helpful to reflect on the seasons of life. Perhaps right now you're in a season of waiting or sowing, or maybe you're going through a season of pain or uncertainty. But here's the important part. Every season has its purpose, even those that seem difficult. If you're currently in a season of struggle, don't forget that it's temporary. Just as spring follows winter, difficulties will also pass. And the same goes for moments of success and abundance. They are a gift, but they too are fleeting. The key here is learning to live and embrace each season for what it is, without resisting it. Understanding that we do not have absolute control over the timing of our lives frees us from a great burden. How much stress and anxiety disappear when we accept that not everything depends on us. There is a much greater plan at work, and that plan is in God's hands. He carries out that plan in His way and in His timing. And when we learn to trust in this process, we begin to live with a peace that transcends circumstances in our daily lives. This translates into comfort during difficult or uncertain times when it seems like nothing is going as planned. We can remember that God is orchestrating something perfect. And when things are going well, we can cherish those moments of success and joy, knowing that they too are part of the cycle of life. In the end, the key is accepting that although our desires may not materialize immediately, God's plan always unfolds at the exact right time. And it is in this trust that we find peace. Point 11, Isaiah 55, verse 8. For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, declares the Lord. As the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts. Sometimes we think we have everything figured out. We believe that if we make enough plans or calculate every step carefully, things should turn out as we expect. But then something happens that changes everything, and we start to wonder, why did God allow this? What am I doing wrong? Isaiah 55 verse 8 gives us an answer that may feel uncomfortable but is also liberating. My thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways. In other words, God is telling us that His way of seeing things is completely different from ours. And though we may not always understand what is happening, His plan is infinitely better than anything we could imagine. Imagine this. You're looking at a small piece of a puzzle, but God holds the entire picture in His hands. From our limited human perspective, we can only see what is right in front of us. We focus on the present, on our emotions, on what we feel right now. But God operates from eternity, seeing everything from a height we cannot even fathom. And you know what? That is something incredible. It invites us to let go of control, to accept that we won't always understand, but that we can trust that God does. Sometimes God's ways seem confusing or even contradictory to what we have planned. We want to go one way, and suddenly it feels like everything is shifting in the opposite direction. In those moments, we ask ourselves, why, God? Why did you allow this to happen? But here's the truth. His ways are higher than ours. What seems like an obstacle, what appears to be a failure, could be exactly what you need to take the next step in your growth, in your purpose. Every circumstance, even the most difficult, God is using to shape you, to teach you something you might not have learned any other way. It's not always about understanding the why in the moment, but trusting that there's a greater purpose behind everything that happens. Let me tell you something. Trusting God when things don't make sense is one of the greatest challenges of our faith. It's easy to trust God when everything is going well, when everything aligns perfectly. But what happens when you don't have the answers? What happens when life seems to be falling apart? It's in those moments that our trust is truly tested, and that's where faith comes into play. God is orchestrating something. You may not see it immediately, but it's there. What you can do is rest in the certainty that His bigger, wiser hand is guiding your destiny. Isaiah uses an incredible metaphor. As the heavens are higher than the earth, So are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts. This is a powerful visual reminder. It shows us the vast difference between our limited understanding and the immensity of God's wisdom. Instead of becoming frustrated by not understanding, this should give us comfort. God sees the whole picture. He knows what we don't know, and we can trust that even if we don't understand now, His plan is perfect. Recognizing this brings us to a place of humility. Sometimes, without realizing it, we fall into the trap of thinking we know everything, that we can control every aspect of our lives. But the reality is, our vision is limited, and the sooner we accept this, the sooner we can surrender to God's divine plan. When we stop fighting against what we don't understand and hand over control to God, we find a peace that we can never obtain on our own. It's in that surrender that we truly find rest. Practically speaking, this means learning to let go of our anxieties when things don't go as expected. Instead of becoming overwhelmed, we can remember that God is working for our good, even when we don't see it. Psalmody point 10, Ecclesiastes 3 verse 1. To everything there is a season, and a time to every purpose under heaven. Notice this. All of us at some point have felt the anxiety of wanting things to happen quickly. We want our dreams to be fulfilled immediately, prayers answered instantly, difficulties to end right away. And when that doesn't happen, we get frustrated. We wonder if something is wrong. But Ecclesiastes 3 verse 1 offers us a truth that can transform the way we view life. To everything there is a season, and a time to every purpose under heaven. This verse reminds us that no matter how desperate we are to rush the process, God has a perfect plan. And within that plan, everything has its appropriate time. Life is like a cycle. It has its seasons. Just as we cannot hasten the arrival of summer or stop winter, there are moments in life we simply must accept and live through. Every event we face, every situation we go through, has a purpose and happens in its perfect time. However, many times we struggle against these rhythms. We don't want to wait. We try to control everything, rush ahead, or avoid what makes us uncomfortable. But in that struggle lies the conflict. It's not that things are going wrong. It's that we are trying to force the timing instead of trusting God's timing. Waiting is not easy. Sometimes it feels like everything is on pause, as if God has forgotten our prayers. But waiting on God's timing is not passivity. On the contrary, it is an act of faith. Every season has its reason for being, and sometimes the most powerful act is to wait patiently. There are seasons of planting and seasons of harvest. There are times when we move quickly and other times when we simply need to stay still. What happens is that God has absolute control over these times, and though we may not always understand it, His timing is perfect. Everything has its specific hour, and that hour does not come before or after. It arrives exactly when it should. There is infinite wisdom in God's timing. He knows the best moment for each thing to happen in your life. Have you noticed how many problems we avoid when we stop rushing things? When we try to force situations or jump ahead, that's when we make mistakes. On the other hand, when we trust in God's timing, He provides exactly what we need at the exact moment we need it. Not before, not after, but always on time. It's helpful to reflect on the seasons of life. Perhaps right now you're in a season of waiting or sowing, or maybe you're going through a season of pain or uncertainty. But here's the important part. Every season has its purpose, even those that seem difficult. If you're currently in a season of struggle, don't forget that it's temporary. Just as spring follows winter, difficulties will also pass. And the same goes for moments of success and abundance. They are a gift, but they too are fleeting. The key here is learning to live and embrace each season for what it is, without resisting it. Understanding that we do not have absolute control over the timing of our lives frees us from a great burden. How much stress and anxiety disappear when we accept that not everything depends on us. There's a much greater plan at work, and that plan is in God's hands. He carries out that plan in His way and in His timing. And when we learn to trust in this process, we begin to live with a peace that transcends circumstances in our daily lives. This translates into comfort during difficult or uncertain times when it seems like nothing is going as planned. We can remember that God is orchestrating something perfect. And when things are going well, we can cherish those moments of success and joy, knowing that they too are part of the cycle of life. In the end, the key is accepting that although our desires may not materialize immediately, God's plan always unfolds at the exact right time, and it is in this trust that we find peace. Point 11, Isaiah 55, verse 8. For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, declares the Lord. As the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts. Sometimes we think we have everything figured out. We believe that if we make enough plans or calculate every step carefully, things should turn out as we expect. But then something happens that changes everything, and we start to wonder, why did God allow this? What am I doing wrong? Isaiah 55, verse 8 gives us an answer that may feel uncomfortable but is also liberating. My thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways. In other words, God is telling us that his way of seeing things is completely different from ours. And though we may not always understand what is happening, his plan is infinitely better than anything we could imagine. Imagine this. You're looking at a small piece of a puzzle, but God holds the entire picture in his hands. From our limited human perspective, we can only see what is right in front of us. We focus on the present, on our emotions, on what we feel right now. But God operates from eternity, seeing everything from a height we cannot even fathom. And you know what? That is something incredible. It invites us to let go of control, to accept that we won't always understand, but that we can trust that God does. Sometimes God's ways seem confusing or even contradictory to what we have planned. We want to go one way, and suddenly it feels like everything is shifting in the opposite direction. In those moments, we ask ourselves, why, God? Why did you allow this to happen? But here's the truth. His ways are higher than ours. What seems like an obstacle, what appears to be a failure, could be exactly what you need to take the next step in your growth, in your purpose. Every circumstance, even the most difficult, God is using to shape you, to teach you something you might not have learned any other way. It's not always about understanding the why in the moment, but trusting that there is a greater purpose behind everything that happens. Let me tell you something. Trusting God when things don't make sense is one of the greatest challenges of our faith. It's easy to trust God when everything is going well, when everything aligns perfectly. But what happens when you don't have the answers? What happens when life seems to be falling apart? It's in those moments that our trust is truly tested. And that's where faith comes into play. God is orchestrating something. You may not see it immediately, but it's there. What you can do is rest in the certainty that his bigger, wiser hand is guiding your destiny. Isaiah uses an incredible metaphor. As the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts. This is a powerful visual reminder. It shows us the vast difference between our limited understanding and the immensity of God's wisdom. Instead of becoming frustrated by not understanding, this should give us comfort. God sees the whole picture. He knows what we don't know, and we can trust that even if we don't understand now, his plan is perfect. Recognizing this brings us to a place of humility. Sometimes, without realizing it, we fall into the trap of thinking we know everything, that we can control every aspect of our lives. But the reality is, our vision is limited, and the sooner we accept this, the sooner we can surrender to God's divine plan. MES the road won't be the one we planned, but we can trust that will be the best road. God's purpose won't be delayed or frustrated. His plan will unfold in the perfect timing, and we can be certain that, in the end, everything will have been worth it. So, when you find yourself in those moments of uncertainty, when you don't understand what's happening, remember this. God's ways are higher than ours, and though you may not always comprehend it, you can trust that he is leading you exactly where you need to be. Point 12, Romans 11, verse 33. Oh, the depth of the riches of the wisdom and knowledge of God. How unsearchable his judgments, and his paths beyond tracing out. Notice this. Sometimes we try to understand everything that happens around us, right? We want answers, logical explanations that will bring us peace. But when it comes to the wisdom of God, there's something we must remember. It's incomprehensible to us. Romans 11, verse 33 says it so clearly. Oh, the depth of the riches of the wisdom and knowledge of God. How unsearchable his judgments, and his paths beyond tracing out. This means that God's wisdom goes far beyond what we can understand. There's a huge contrast between our limited capacity and God's infinite wisdom. We only see a fragment of the story, a small moment in time. God sees everything, the past, the present, and the future. It's all clear to him, while we're trying to piece together the puzzle of life with the pieces we have. God already has a complete picture. It's easy to get frustrated when we don't understand why certain things happen, but we must remember that God is seeing the entire panorama, not just the individual parts. And it's more than that. The riches of God's knowledge encompass far more than we can imagine. God doesn't just understand what we see. He understands the invisible, the unseen forces behind every situation, every decision, every long-term consequence. When he acts, he isn't driven by the moment, but by a perfect knowledge aligned with his divine purpose. What may seem to us like an inexplicable decision or a meaningless situation has, for God, a profound meaning that fits perfectly into his eternal plan. Of course, that doesn't mean it's always easy to accept his judgments. Sometimes, God's judgments are difficult for us to understand. How many times have you felt like things don't make sense, or that what you're going through isn't fair? We've all been there. But the reality is, God's judgments are perfect, even when we don't understand them. It's like trying to look through a foggy window. We don't see clearly, but God sees everything with perfect clarity. That's where trust comes in. We have to trust that he knows what he's doing, even when we don't understand. The word unsearchable in this verse means impossible to trace. God's ways are so deep and complex that we can't fully follow them. And that's a good thing. If we could understand everything God does, then he wouldn't be God, right? His greatness goes beyond what we can imagine, while we are limited by our human perspective. God sees everything with an eternal perspective. He knows exactly where he's taking us and why. And that's where we need to practice spiritual humility, accepting that we can't understand everything. It's an act of humility to recognize that God is infinitely wiser than us, and that we don't need to have all the answers. It's liberating when we stop trying to figure out every detail and simply trust in God's wisdom. God, our relationship with him grows stronger. Sometimes what we need most is to say, God, I don't understand, but I trust that you do. Instead of living frustrated or anxious about what we don't comprehend, we can live in awe and reverence for the greatness of God. Each day is an opportunity to marvel at his wisdom and recognize that he knows what we do not. This sense of wonder leads us to deeper worship. When we acknowledge how great God is and how small our abilities are in comparison, our hearts fill with gratitude. So, when things don't make sense, when you're facing a situation that seems impossible to understand, remember that God knows what he's doing. Trust in the midst of uncertainty. You don't need to have all the answers. You just need to know that God is in control, and in that divine control, you can rest. Hand over your worries to God, knowing that his wisdom goes far beyond what you can see. This brings an incredible peace. That's why, when you face moments of doubt or confusion, remember this verse. The judgments of God are unsearchable, his ways inscrutable, but his wisdom is perfect. He sees far beyond what you can see. And though you may not understand every step of the journey, you can trust that God has a perfect plan guiding everything toward the purpose he has for you. Point 13, Isaiah 40, verse 28. Do you not know? Have you not heard? The Lord is the everlasting God, the creator of the ends of the earth. He will not grow tired or weary, and his understanding is unsearchable. Have you ever felt completely exhausted to the point where you didn't know how to keep going? I'm sure we've all been there. But there's something incredible in Isaiah 40, verse 28 that offers us deep comfort. Do you not know? Have you not heard? The Lord is the everlasting God, the creator of the ends of the earth. He will not grow tired or weary, and his understanding is unsearchable. How powerful it is to know that God never grows tired. While we, with our human limitations, reach the edge of our strength, God is tireless and always there with the power and energy we need. Think about this. God is eternal. He has no beginning or end. We are bound by time, living day by day, week after week. But God exists beyond time. While we grow old, grow weary, and feel like the days are slipping away, God remains the same, always powerful, always full of life. And this has profound implications for us. If God is eternal, It means he is never limited by time or weariness. This gives us the assurance that we can always trust him because his power does not diminish with the passing of years. God is the creator of everything that exists, from the farthest reaches of the earth to the smallest details of your life. This means his power is absolute over all creation. If he could create everything we see, imagine how much more he can handle our worries and difficulties. Sometimes we feel overwhelmed by our circumstances, but when we remember that the same God who created the universe sustains our lives, our perspective changes completely. And here's what amazes me the most. God does not grow tired or weary while we struggle with our limitations. He remains strong and ever present. In those moments when we feel like we can't go on, God continues to be our inexhaustible source of strength. We can turn to him again and again, and he will never run out. And he doesn't just give us physical strength. He also provides emotional and spiritual strength in the midst of our weaknesses. God is our constant fortitude. What's also incredible is the unfathomable wisdom of God. There are so many things we don't understand, so many unanswered questions, but God knows everything. Nothing escapes his understanding. He sees the whole picture, even when we only see fragments. This invites us to practice humility. We don't have to understand everything, because God does. Trusting in his infinite wisdom allows us to rest in moments of uncertainty. In those difficult times when nothing seems to make sense, that's when we must ask ourselves, who is God? He is the eternal God, the creator of the ends of the earth. He is not limited by our difficulties or doubts. His ways, though sometimes incomprehensible to us, are perfect. Knowing this gives us deep comfort because God does not leave us alone. Even in our darkest moments, he is present, working, guiding, and sustaining us. In a world where everything seems to change and where we often feel out of control, the omnipresence and omnipotence of God bring us indescribable peace. God is everywhere, and he sees everything. There is no place or situation outside of his reach. This means that no matter what you face, God is already there, working on your behalf. Nothing is outside of his control, and when we rest in this truth, we can let go of anxiety and fully trust in his plan. This passage from Isaiah also invites us to deeply reflect on our own perception of God. Sometimes we limit him, seeing him through our human perspective and forgetting his greatness. But when we meditate on these truths, we realize that God is far greater than we can imagine. And when we remember this, our spiritual strength is renewed. We stop seeing our difficulties as insurmountable obstacles and start seeing them as opportunities for God to display his power and wisdom in our lives. So, when you feel exhausted, when things don't make sense, remember this. God is eternal, tireless, and his wisdom is unfathomable. He is in control, even when we don't understand. And in that knowledge, we can find peace and rest, knowing that God is in charge and that he never tires of sustaining us. Point 14, Psalm 145, verse 17. The Lord is righteous in all his ways and kind in all his works. His works. When we think about God, we often imagine him as either just or kind, but sometimes we forget that he is both at the same time in perfect harmony. Psalm 145, verse 17 tells us, the Lord is righteous in all his ways and kind in all his works. It's not that God is just sometimes and kind at other times. He is both always. And the incredible thing is that there is no conflict in his nature. God's righteousness and kindness operate in perfect unity, shaping how he relates to us and how he governs the universe. God's righteousness is more than just a concept. It's the absolute standard of what is right. God doesn't need to conform to an external moral code. He is the moral code. When we say that God is righteous, it means that everything he does is upright, pure, and correct. Every decision he makes, every judgment he issues is perfect. Sometimes this is hard to see in a world full of injustices, but the truth is that even when things seem unfair from our limited perspective, God is acting in righteousness. Let's not forget that God is faithful to his promises, and his righteousness guarantees that he will fulfill everything he has said. But here's where the goodness of God comes into play. This isn't just any kind of goodness. It's not just being good in the human sense. It's an infinite and perfect goodness. God demonstrates his goodness in countless ways, in creation, in our daily blessings, in the air we breathe. Everything God does is filled with care, love, and compassion. Moreover, divine grace is a beautiful manifestation of that goodness. It gives us far more than we deserve, and He is always working for our good, even when we don't see or understand it. It's this combination of righteousness and goodness that allows us to fully trust God, even when life doesn't make sense. In those moments when we find ourselves in chaos, or when we feel surrounded by injustice, we can remember that God is in control. He remains righteous and kind, and He is working in ways we cannot see. Nothing escapes Him. Every situation, every challenge is under His dominion, and He will work it out for our good. But what happens when we face situations we simply don't understand? When we suffer and it seems like God's justice is far away, how do we respond? Here's where we need to remember something key. Our perspective is limited. We only see part of the picture, but God sees it all. He sees the beginning, the middle, and the end. And though we may not always understand why things happen, we can trust that God is righteous, even in the midst of pain. His justice is not indifferent to our suffering. Sometimes God allows us to go through trials to strengthen us, to purify us, but He always does so with a heart full of goodness and compassion. In the midst of trials, we can also trust in God's goodness. It's not that He has abandoned us. God is present in every moment of pain, watching over us, guiding us. His goodness doesn't disappear in difficult times. On the contrary, it's when we need it most. It's easy to see God's goodness on sunny days, but it's in a storm where His compassion and care become even more evident. He knows our weaknesses and walks with us every step of the way. So how do we live in light of this divine justice and goodness? First, by recognizing that God is always faithful. No matter what we face, God doesn't change. His character is immutable. This means we can always trust that He will act with righteousness and goodness in any situation. In our relationships and decisions, we should reflect that same justice and goodness, being fair to others and showing compassion, just as God does with us. And if you ever doubt, if you ever wonder how God's justice can coexist with a world full of injustice, remember this. God sees far beyond what you can see. His plan is bigger, wider, and deeper. His justice and goodness never fail. And when we understand that, our faith grows stronger, and we find peace in the midst of the storm, knowing that in the end, God will always be just and kind, just as He has promised. Conclusion: a sovereign and perfect plan. As we conclude this journey through Scripture, one unshakable truth emerges. God has a sovereign and perfect plan for each of us. No matter how many plans we make, how many obstacles we face, or how many times we feel lost, we can be certain that His purpose prevails. Everything we go through, both the good and the difficult, has a greater purpose within His plan. This invites us to live with confidence, knowing that even when we don't understand the why or the how, God is in control. It's crucial that when we face the trials and challenges of life, we commit our ways to the Lord, trusting that He will act according to His will. His plan for us is filled with hope, and though we may not always see the light at the end of the tunnel, we can rest knowing that God is working at all times. The love and goodness of God are manifested even in the midst of the darkest trials, reminding us that we are not alone. I want to invite you to reflect on everything you've heard today. God has chosen you, predestined you for an eternal purpose, and that purpose is greater than we can imagine. Live with the confidence that God is in control. If this message resonated with you, I want to extend an invitation. Share this video with those who need to hear these words of hope. And if you haven't already, subscribe so we can continue diving deeper into the truths of God's Word. May God bless you, and always remember, His purpose will prevail. If you've made it to the end of this video, you are someone dedicated and committed to spiritual growth and drawing closer to God. The fact that you've stayed until the end shows your determination to absorb knowledge and apply it to your life. Keep seeking wisdom and working to strengthen your faith and relationship with God. Remember that learning and drawing closer to God are part of a continuous and rewarding journey. My videos aim to help people of all ages grow closer to God by rediscovering forgotten teachings and deepening their understanding of His divine word. Comment, "I am closer to God," to let us know that you've made it this far and that you're on this journey of faith with us.